Islam. With us, all members must proclaim their nationality. And we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are part and a parcel of this said government, and know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live and the nations of the earth. This is the reason why Allah, the great God of the universe, ordained noble Jew Ali the prophet to redeem his people from their sinful ways. The Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. At this time, I'd like to recite the Moorish American prayer because this is the source from which we draw our strength. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation by night and by day through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. First off, I'd like to rise to give praise to Allah. I like to give praise to Allah because it is He who is the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. I like to give honor to Allah's holy and illustrious prophet, Noble Drew Ali. I like to give honor to Prophet Noble Drew Ali because it was he who reached down into the watery grave of Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and the beast, and set you and me back upright on our feet again. I like to give honor to the forerunner to the prophet, Marcus Moses Garvey. I like to give honor to Marcus Moses Garvey because this brother had to have pure thoughts in order to pave the way for love. I like to give honor to all of those and honor to all of you that have or laid in assist us in this, our divine and gigantic mission, the uplifting of fallen humanity. And last but not least, I'd like to give a special honor to F-It, because so many of us don't even try. I'd like to read from the Moorish Holy Quran that was divinely prepared by our holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali, for our earthly and our divine salvation. And I'll be reading from chapter 4. And chapter 4 deals with death and burial of Elizabeth, Matheno's lesson, the ministry of death. And it's important that we listen and look at this real seriously, because this is something that Noble Drew Ali brought to us from the great God Allah to help redeem us from our sinful ways and to warn us of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. So I'm going to read this chapter, and then we're going to get down and we're going to talk about this. Because reading this chapter reminded me when I was in Vietnam. That's why I want to read this, because we're talking about the ministry of death. And when I was in Vietnam, I was a combat medic. And more times than not, I always had somebody that lost a family member. And they couldn't handle it. They was crying and everything else. But Drew Ali told us something in this chapter that we all going to get down and talk about today, and it's going to be a benefit to all of us, because a lot of us can't handle it. Death and burial of Elizabeth, Matheno's lesson, the ministry of death. When John was 12 years old, his mother died, and neighbors laid her body in a tomb among her kindred in the Hebrew burying grounds and near to Zachariah's tomb. And John was deeply grieved. He wept. Matheno said, "It is not well to weep because of death. Death is no enemy of man. It is a friend who, when the work of life is done, yet cuts the cord that binds the human boat to earth, that it might sail on smoother seas. No language can describe a mother's warmth, and yours was tried and true. But she was not called hence until her tasks were done. The cause of death are always for the best, for we are solving problems there as well as here, and one is sure to find himself where he can solve his problems best. It is selfishness that make one wish to call to earth again departed souls. Then let your mother rest in peace. Just let her noble life be strength and inspiration unto you. A crisis in your life has come, and you must have a clear conception of the work that you are called to do. The sages of the ages called you harbinger. The prophet looked at you and said, "He is Elijah come again." Your mission here is that of a harbinger, for you will go before the Messiah's face to pave the way and make the people ready to receive the King. This readiness is purity of heart. None but the pure in heart can recognize the King. To teach men to be pure in heart, you must yourself be pure in heart and word and deed. In infancy, the vow for you was made, and you became of Nazareth. The razor shall not touch your face nor head, and you shall not taste wine or fiery drinks. Men need a pattern for their lives. They love to follow, not to lead. The man who stands upon the corners of the path and points the way but does not go is just a pointer, and a block of wood can do the same. The teacher treads the way. On every span of ground, he leaves his footprints clearly cut, which all can see and be assured that he, their master, went that way. Men comprehend the inner life by what they see and do. They come to Allah through ceremonies and forms. And so when they would make men know that sins are washed away by purity in life, a ceremony and form. And so when they would make men know that sins are washed away by purity in life, a rich symbolic may be introduced. In water, wash the bodies of the people who would turn away from sin and strive for purity in life. This rite of cleanliness is a preparation rite, and they who thus are cleansed compile to the temple of purity. And you shall say, you men of Israel, hear, reform, and wash, become the sons of purity, and you shall be forgiven. This rite of cleansing and this temple are but symbolic of the soul, which does not come with outward show, but is the temple within. Now you may never point the way and tell the multitudes to do what you have never done, but you must go before and show the way. You are to teach that men must wash. So you must lead the way. Your body must be washed, symbolic of the cleaning of the soul. John said, why need I wait? May I not go once at once and wash? Matheno said, tis well. And then they went down to the Jordan Fall, and east of Jericho, just where they hosted of Israel, crossed when they first entered Canaan. They tarried not upon the time. Now, let me do this right here. I'm going to read the last verse. And this is something that we are still studying in Sunday school. It says, for 18 years, John lived and wrought within the temple gates. And here he conquered self, became a mastermind, and learned the duty of a harbinger. We just had a reading of the Moorish Holy Quran, divinely prepared by our holy prophet Noble Jew Ali for our earthly and divine salvation. I'm going to talk today about the ministry of death. A friend of mine, Mr. Kaysen, at Kaysen's Meat Market up on MLK. So sister and her mother used to come through his restaurant frequently and buy a lot of different kind of foods. His mother passed. And when his mother passed, you know, her daughter, who was a school teacher, she was going through a lot of trials and tribulations. And it was hard to overcome. So because of what I just read, and we're going to talk about this ministry of death, I hope we all can get some understanding. So let's say when John was 12, his mother died. And it said neighbors laid her body in a tomb among her kindreds in the Hebrew burying ground and near to Zachariah's tomb. Now let me stop right here for a minute now. We're talking about Zacharias. And we're talking about Elizabeth. And we're talking about John the Baptist. Elizabeth is John's mother. Elizabeth is the husband of Zacharias. So John passed, and neighbors laid her body in a tomb near to Zacharias' tomb. And it reminds me of when my mother passed. And it reminds me of when a lot of my friends lost their mother, lost their family members, lost everybody that meant something to them, because the book say death ain't no enemy to man. It say it is a friend, and when the work of life is done, it just cuts the cord that binds this human boat to earth, that it might sail on smoother seas. So now John's mother died, and neighbors laid her body in a tomb in the Hebrew burial ground in Zacharias' tomb. Zacharias is John's father, and John was going through some changes, man. John was going crazy because he lost his father. And the lesson came when Jesus was teaching. He said, death is no enemy of man. Once you finish the work that you have to do on this plane of things made manifest, then you can go on to another plane, because there might be some work that you have to complete. Because Jew Ali tells us here that man is not the body nor the soul. He's a spirit and a part of Allah. There was a funeral here recently, and a brother had just lost his sister. And when he lost his sister, the man fell on the ground and was turning around and going through crazy stuff, crying. And reminded me when John said, death ain't no enemy. Because when your work is finished on this plane of things made manifest, you will go on to another plane and do a greater work. So it reminded me as I said earlier, when I was in the military. And every day we might lose 3 or 4 people. This was in the Vietnam era. And I wanted to cry, but I couldn't cry because I was in the military. And I had to redeem these people from what they was going through. So now I want to talk about the ministry of death, because death ain't no enemy to man. It's a friend. Everybody gonna go through trials and tribulations in this life. So your mother, your sisters, whoever else in your family, when they pass form, this is a lesson for you to teach. It's a lesson for you to teach the family and let the family know that death is no enemy to man. It is a friend. But when the work of life is done, it's just cuts this cord that binds this human boat, because this is a human boat. Jubilee tells us that man is not the body nor the soul. He is a spirit and a part of Allah. So we're talking about spirit now. We said man is not the body nor the soul, but we said man is spirit. And if man is spirit, and if he's not the body nor the soul, then he's going through trials and tribulations. A many trials and tribulations we are going to go through on this plane of things made manifest. So we have to learn this lesson. We have to learn this lesson right now, and it's very important that we learn the lesson, because there's no enemy to man. And until we learn these lessons, see, these lessons that we have was given to us from the Egyptian Adam. This is not something that somebody just telling you. We was taught these lessons as a child. In the Moorish Science Temple of America, we are taught these lessons. And we are taught the lesson about when John was 12, his mother died. And neighbors laid her body in a tomb among her kindred in the Hebrew burying ground. And John became a mastermind. And the reason why John became a mastermind, that's why in this chapter say John became a mastermind and learned the duties of a harbinger. So there's certain lessons that we have to learn. There's certain things that we have to learn here on this plane of things made manifest. So now when we talk about life and when we talk about death, right now, the lesson of life and the lesson of death is a lesson that you and I have to be able to teach and have to be able to apply to ourselves. So now my friend is passed. He's gone on now. And a lot of people say he's gone on to glory. Not necessarily. Because when you finish doing the work on this plane, then you still might have to come back. Because until you learn all the lessons that there is to learn, you're going to constantly return anyway. That's why I say it ain't no friend. It ain't no enemy. It's a friend. And when the work of life is done, see, when your work is done, you going on to another plane to do a greater work. And the blessing is that when you talking about growing, when you begin to talk about growth and development, the thing that you used to do, you probably don't do no more. And if you do it again, then you're going to have to finish that lesson up. You're going to have to overcome and be the strength of Allah made manifest. Now, how can one become the strength of Allah made manifest? Let me stop here. I was with some brothers today, and one of them said that he's still overcoming some things. Some things in his life he's still overcoming. He haven't let this go yet, and he haven't let that go yet. But you know, it said many ages man gonna tarry until all his lessons are learned. So until you learn all of these lessons, you're gonna keep repeating. You're gonna keep coming back to this plane of things made manifest and go through these trials and tribulations until you learn the lesson that you need to learn. I'm gonna read something else. I want to read another chapter here because I'm reading a lot of these chapters because a lot of times we say we with this side or we with that side, but we talking about the divine side now. And when we talking about the divine side, we talking about the side where Allah sent Noble Jew Ali to redeem us from our sinful ways and to warn us of the wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. So now let's look at chapter 3. And when we're looking at chapter 3, we're talking about Elihu. And in talking about Elihu, you're talking about the ministry and the death. Now, chapter 3, it said, again, Elihu met his pupils in the sacred grove and said, no man live unto himself, for every living thing is bound by cord to every other living thing. Now, you have a living thing and you have a dead thing. Now, what's the difference between the living thing and what's the difference between the dead thing? When you living according to justice, mercy, love, and right, then you're talking about something that's living. See, in all the world, there's two things. One is living, and the other is dead. See, and you have to strive to reach perfection in life, and you gain perfection through experience. Now, verse 3, it says, blessed art the pure in heart, for they will love and not demand love in return. They will not do to other men what they will not have other men do unto them. There are two selves, the higher and lower self. The higher self is human spirit, clothed with soul, made in the form of Allah. The lower self, the carnal self, the body of desires, is a reflection of the higher self, distorted by the murky ethers of the flesh. The lower self is an illusion and will pass away. The higher self is Allah in man and will not pass away. So you see, we got two selves. We have a higher self and we have a lower self. The lower self is the carnal self, is the body of desires, is a reflection of your higher self, but it is distorted by the murky ethers of the flesh. Now, the higher self is justice, mercy, love, and right. The lower self is what the higher self is not. The lower self breeds hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms. Now I want to talk about that. They tell you what the higher self is, and they tell you what the lower self is. But when I go to the temple, or when I go to the synagogue, or when I go to the mosque, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the Allah in man. We're talking about the law in man that can't pass away. See, you can't pass away when you're in your higher self because it is a law in man. The only thing that pass away and don't return is the lower self. So when you leave this plane of things made manifest and you still haven't overcame certain illusions that's going on within you, you got to come back until you complete your lessons. This is the purpose for Noble Jew Ali bringing us these literature so we can redeem ourselves from our sinful ways and to warn us of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. That's why it said Noble Jew Ali told us about the national and divine movement. See, one of them is going to pass and one of them is going to return. And the one that passed is the lessons that you have overcome. There's many lessons. It said many ages man will tarry until all his lessons are learned. So now I got friends, because we kind of old now. They still going through trials and tribulations. Not just the trials and tribulations that's dealing with the human body and deal with the human frailties, but lessons that we need to learn. And a lot of times we think that we're in our higher self. The higher self is justice, mercy, love, and right, which are the attributes of hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms. The higher self is the embodiment of truth. The lower self is truth reversed, and so is falsehood manifest. The higher self is justice, mercy, love, and right. The lower self is what the higher self is not. The lower self breeds hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harm. Now it's telling you what the lower self is. It said the lower self breeds hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harm, which are the attributes of Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and beast. So now what I'm going to have to do right now, I'm going to have to look up and apply to myself, what does the attribute of Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and beast have to do with me, and where do I fit in with these attributes? Because when Drew Ali tell me about hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that is harm, which are the attributes of Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and beast, these are things that we have to look at. These are things that we have to study and apply to ourselves. Because that's why I say man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And there's no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his mother and father unless his power extend beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. So now we're talking about some good stuff. We're talking about some powerful stuff. Now let's look at verse 11 again. It say the lower self breeds hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms. The lower self is rich in promises, but poor in blessedness and peace. It offers pleasure, joy, and satisfying gain, but gives unrest, misery, and death. It gives men apples that are lovely to the eye and pleasant to the smell. Their cores are full of bitterness and gall. If you would ask me what to study, I would say yourselves. And when you well have studied them, and then would ask you what to study next, I would reply yourselves. So no matter what you're going through, if I ask you to study yourself and they ask you what to study next, you will have to say yourself. Because when man studies his higher self, he's studying the law in man. When man studies his lower self, he is studying those attributes that we got to get rid of. This is why I'm not going to tell you that I'm going through trials and tribulations. I'm still dealing with this attribute, or I'm still dealing with that attribute, because Noble Drew Ali came to redeem us from our sinful ways and to warn us of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. Now, let me look at verse 15. He said, he who knows well his lower self knows the illusions of the world, knows of the things that pass away. And he who knows his higher self knows Allah, knows well the thing that cannot pass away. So now we're talking about two things. We're talking about the lower self, and we're talking about the higher self. And we're saying that when you're in your higher self, this is Allah in man. This is the attributes that you need to overcome and be the son of Allah made manifest. Let me go down some more. Verse 16, it says, thrice blessed is the man who has made purity and love his very own. He has been ransomed from the pearls of the lower self and is in himself the higher self. Men seek salvation from the evil that they deem a living monster of the nether world, and they have gods that are but demons in the skies, all powerful and yet full of jealousy, hate, and lust. So we're talking about the demon in the skies. And when we're talking about the demon in the sky, see, we have a lot of people talk about the angels, and we have people talking about the devil. But when you talk about the devil, when you talk about Lucifer, each one of these are different attributes. These are things that you have to overcome within yourself. Because when you say Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and beast, which are the attributes of hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything in the heart, then you coming into the kingdom of heaven. See, because Allah never made a heaven for man. He never made a hell. We are creators and make our own. So we have to stop seeking for a heaven in the sky. We have to open up the windows of our heart. And when we do that, then a heaven will come to us with boundless joy. So now we're talking about the higher self, and we're talking about the lower self. So when Noble Drew Ali come on the scene and tell us about nationality and divine creed, which are the other 2/5 that was missing. And these 5/5 make us whole again. And when we become whole, then that means we become one with our Father, God Allah. How do we become one with our Father, God Allah? By the things that we do, by the things that we say, by our attributes, and by us really learning to love instead of hate. Because in the world, ain't but two things: the higher self and the lower self. And if we begin to understand the attributes of our higher self and our lower self, then we become one with our Father, God Allah. Let me get into something else. Now this is a good chapter here. This is a good chapter that I'm going to read from because it's important that I do. Okay. So the chapter that I'm going to read from now is chapter 15. And this is a very important chapter because this chapter here deals with death and it deals with life. And it talks about the logos. It's talking about the harbinger. And it reads on this wise. Chapter 15, the divine ministry of Jesus. Jesus goes to the wilderness for self-examination, where he remains 40 days, is subjected to 3 temptations. He overcomes, returns to the camp of John, and begin teaching. So now we're talking about attributes. We're talking about things to overcome. We're talking about self-examination. So when you're talking about self-examination, you're looking at yourself. He said, man, have overcome. Just like when you go to school. You go to junior high school and you go to high school. But as you take your lessons, then afterwards, you're going to have a test. So now we're talking about self-examination. So let's examine ourselves. And I'll start with verse 1. It said, the harbinger had paved the way. The Logos has been introduced to men as love made manifest, and he must now begin his divine ministry. And he went forth into the wilderness to be alone with the law, that he might look into his inner heart and note its strength and worthiness. And with himself he talked, he said, my lower self is strong. By many ties I am bound down to carnal life. Have I the strength to overcome and give my life a willing sacrifice for men? When I should stand before the face of men and they demand the proof of my messiahship, what would I say? And then the tempter came and said, if you be the Son of Allah, command these stones to turn to bread. And Jesus said, who is it that demands a test? It is no sign that one is son of Allah because he does a miracle. The devil can do mighty things. Did not the Gentile magicians do great things before the Pharaoh? My words and deeds in all the walks of life shall be the proof of my Messiahship. And then the tempter said, if you will go into Jerusalem and from the temple pinnacle cast down yourself to earth, the people will believe you are the Messiah sent from Allah. Thus you can surely do. For did not David say he gives his angels charge concerning you, and with their hands will they uphold, lest you shall fall. And Jesus said, I will not tempt the Lord my God, Allah. And then the tempter said, look forth upon the world. Behold its honors and its fame. Behold its pleasures and its wealth. If you will give your life to these, they shall be yours. But Jesus said, so we talking about Jesus. And a lot of people, especially those of African descent, they don't honor Jesus anymore. They don't honor Jesus because they think that Jesus is a weakness. But when we understand the lessons that Jesus means justice, and justice is dealing upright, equal, and fair, this is something that was taken away from you, but through the teachers of Noble Jew Ali. He brought these attributes back to us so we can overcome and be the strength of Allah made manifest. Now, let me read from verse 15. And Jesus said, away from me, all tempting thoughts. My heart is fixed. I sprung itself with all his vain ambitions and his pride. For 40 days did Jesus wrestle with his carnal self. His higher self prevailed. He then was hungry, but his friends had found him and they ministered to him. Then Jesus left the wilderness, and in the consciousness of holy breath, he came into the camps of John and taught. This reminds me of a brother from Moorish home number 1. And the Holy Prophet Noble Jew used him to give certain lessons that we needed about divine creed. And Jew Ali told us to learn to love instead of hate. He told us to know of our higher self. He wants us to know of our higher self, and we want us to know about our lower self. But we have to crush one under thy feet and tame the other to that purpose. I was in a conversation just last night, and I was talking to a friend of mine that I haven't talked to in a long time. He's a Moorish American. A lot of his family members studied in the Moorish Science Temple of America. But what we have to understand, what your friends go through, it might not be the same thing that you have to go through. The same lessons that Allah gave you and me, you might have overcome some of these lessons, and I haven't. That's why I say through sin and disobedience, every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact they honor not the creed and principles of their mothers and fathers, but they strayed after the gods of Europe, of whom they knew nothing of. So when we study these lessons are not just for you. These lessons for all those that love Jesus. Now you say you love Jesus, but Jesus means justice. And if you say you love Jesus, then that means you're going to do what Jesus said. Everybody want to say that you love Jesus, but if you love him, they had a song. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Every round gets higher and higher. If you love him, why not serve him? It said again, if you love him, why not serve him? I say I love him, but I can't serve him. I can't serve him because through carnal thoughts and words and deeds, man tore himself away from Allah. He debased himself. Man, I done been through all kind of trials and tribulations. And the reason why I haven't grown as strong as I am today is because I didn't take seriously what the Holy Prophet Noble Drew Ali brought to me that came from Allah. See, everything that we have, Allah gave Drew Ali to give to us. And he said that through these teachings, every one of us can set our house in order. But if we set our house in order, that means we're teaching our children, and our children will learn to love instead of hate. Let me reiterate that. Drew Ali told us if we study these lessons about learning to love instead of hate, this is going to help us get to the kingdom of heaven. Because, see, Allah never made a heaven for man. He never made a hell. We are creators and make our own. So now, let's not seek for heaven in the sky. Let's just open up the windows of our mind and a heaven will come in. So now, the nearest place to meet Allah is in the heart. And we're not talking about a place that you can go to and it pumps this and plus that. When you say serve Allah, that means open up the windows of your heart. And when you say Allah never made a heaven for man, he never made a hell, we talking about heart. And what heart are we talking about? Because man is not the body nor the soul, so man ain't heart either. But he's the attribute. And the attribute is those things within us that we got to let go. Now let me share this with you. In verse 17, it say, then Jesus left the wilderness, and in the conscience of holy breath, he came into the camp of John and taught. So you and me, the more that we overcome, the closer that we get to God. Because God is the ruler of the land. Allah is the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And these attributes are they that get us close to God, comprise to the wisdom. See, wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom is the application of knowledge. So through the Holy Prophet Noble Drew Ali bringing us these teachings will get us closer to the great God Allah. Let me read something else. I want to read from chapter 48. And in dealing with this chapter 48, we're dealing with the ministry of death. We're still dealing with the ministry of death because we're talking about overcoming, becoming the Son of Allah made manifest. So I'm going to read from the end of time and the fulfilling of the prophecies. And it's read on this wise. The last prophet in these days is Noble Drew Ali, who was prepared in due time by Allah to redeem men from their sinful ways and to warn them of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. Now say John the Baptist was the forerunner of Jesus in those days, to warn and stir up the nations, prepare them to meet the coming problem. Now look, it says in modern days there came a forerunner who was divinely prepared by the great God Allah, and his name is Marcus Garvey, who did teach and warn the nations of the earth. Okay. Prophet who was and bring them true and divine creed of Islam, and his name is Noble Drew Ali, who was prepared and sent to this earth by Allah to teach the old-time religion and the everlasting gospel to the sons of men, that every nation shall and must worship under their own vine and fig tree and return to their own and be one with their Father, God Allah. Now, listen to this. It said the Moorish Science Temple of America is a lawful and chartered incorporation. Any subordinate temple that desires to receive a charter, the Prophet had them to issue to every state throughout the United States, that the world may hear and know the truth, that among the descendants of Africa there is still much wisdom to be learned in these days for the redemption of the sons of men under love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. We, as a clean and pure nation, descendants from the inhabitants of Africa, do not desire to amalgamate or marry into the family of the pale-skinned nations of Europe, neither serve the gods of their religion, because our forefathers are the true and divine founders of the first religious creed for the redemption and salvation of mankind on earth. Therefore, we are returning the church and Christianity back to the European nations, as it was prepared by their forefathers for their earthly salvation, while we, the Moorish Americans, are returning to Islam, which was founded by our forefathers for our earthly and our divine salvation. While we, the Moorish Americans, are returning to Islam, which was founded by our forefathers for our earthly and our divine salvation. So when you talk about nationality, you're talking about something earthly. But when you're talking about your higher self, you're talking about something divine. So these lessons that Noble Drew Ali brought us, he said these lessons are for all those that love Jesus. Because this is the only way that we're going to be redeemed from our sinful ways, is to take these lessons that Noble Drew Ali gave us and make them a part of our life. We have to take these teachings, even cursing. It is a sin for any group of people to even use profanity, even in this mildest form. And these are things that Noble Drew Ali taught us, because every day I look at myself and I'm trying to overcome and be the strength of Allah made manifest. So my sister that lost her mother, and she's trying to be closer to her mother because of the trials and tribulations that she went through. And through those trials and tribulations that she went through, it brought her closer to her mother. And being someone close, just like my mother passed on, but the things that she told me, I didn't pay no attention to it. But now I'm paying attention because Drew Ali told me that. That's why I said through sin and disobedience, every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact that they honor not the creed and principles of their mothers and fathers, and strayed after the gods of Europe, of whom they knew nothing of. So now how do we strive for purity in life? You strive for purity in life trying to overcome the things that you never had to overcome before. What do I mean by that? You have to learn the attributes of Lucifer, look it up. Satan, look it up. Devil, dragon, and beast. Look up those attributes and look at yourself, because they are the attributes of hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything else. So now they say theft is the lower self. They say hatred is the lower self. They say slander is the lower self. And if all these are attributes that Noble Drew Ali gave you and me, why aren't we looking at them? We get up every day and talk about nationality, but why don't we teach about divine creed? Can't nobody give it to you though. Because every tub must stand on his own bottom, and every tongue must confess his own. And what are the things that we have to confess? One thing we have to confess, that Allah is God and that Jew Ali is the last prophet. Another thing that we have to is understand is that nationality is the order of the day. Through the advent of slavery, through 711, the 1492, these attributes was given to us to take us away from the great God Allah. And how do you take one away from the great God Allah? Tell him something different than what Jew Ali gave us. Because Jew Ali told us that we were not Negroes. That's an attribute. We wasn't colored. That's an attribute. And we wasn't black. That's your attribute. So when you take on, that's just like right now, I was saying, and I said earlier, that when you talk about the Portuguese, when you talk about the French, when you talk about the Dutch, these are European nations. All these are European nations, but they have different attributes. Because when you begin to talk about the slave trade, all of them, they might have a different accent. But they was European, and now they're Asiatic, because they took, now Jew Ali, they say, when was the head of Satan taken off? 1453, Byzantine. They say, by whom? By Muhammad. Guess what? In 1453, Byzantine, the Moors fought with the Ottoman Turks to restore the Islamic creed. So in 1453, Byzantine, the Moors, we were still in Europe, giving Europe civilization, bringing them out of the Dark Ages, but not knowing that before our last stronghold fell in Granada, Spain, and when we was in Europe in 1453, Byzantine, our time was numbered because Rome was working. That's when we fell then. This is when 1453 Byzantine, when you start calling yourself Negro, colored, and black. Because Negro, again, is a name given to a river in West Africa by Moors because it contained black water. Now we talking about black water, and we talking about the river. So if we are Negro, colored, and black, which are attributes of hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harm, then that's the lesson of the day. Now let me read this verse. It says, therefore, we are returning the church and Christianity back to the European nations as it was prepared by their forefathers for their earthly salvation. While we, the Moorish Americans, are returning to Islam, which was founded by our forefathers for our earthly and divine salvation. So Jew Ali said, we're giving this back. We're giving the church and Christianity back to the European nations. He's telling us that because in 711 and 1492 is when that 1500 era coming in. Because 711, the 1492, but 1500 is when you see it right here. It said, while we the Moorish Americans are returned to Islam, which was founded by our forefathers for our earthly and divine salvation. But through the slave trade, we didn't have enough time to give this back because they took it. But while we the Moorish Americans are returning to Islam, which was founded by our forefathers for our earthly and our divine salvation. Now there's an earthly salvation and there's divine salvation. And what salvation we are talking about? We're talking about a divine salvation. Because when you're talking about the divine, you're talking about the divine creed. Nationality and divine creed. Your creed is the attribute that keep you close to Allah. They say you worship Allah with voice and lip, but your hearts are far away and set on gold. Now, Jew Ali came. He came to you and he came to me. And he told us something that we all didn't look at. And this is what he told us. He said, through sin and disobedience, every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact that they honor not the creed and principles of their mothers and fathers and strayed after the gods of Europe, of whom they knew nothing. So when you call yourself black, when you call yourself colored, when you call yourself Negro, you're separating yourself from the human family because you are no longer who your forefathers were. That's why I said it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the name and principles that delude to slavery. Now let's look at verse 9. It says, according to all true and divine records of the human race. Listen, there is no Negro, black, or colored race attached to the human family, because all the inhabitants of Africa were and are of the human race, descendants of the ancient Canaanite nations from the Holy Land of Canaan. What your ancient forefathers were, you are today without doubt or contradiction. There is no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his forefathers unless his power extends beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. These holy and divine laws are from the prophet Noah Ali, the founder of the uniting of the Moorish Science Temple of America. These laws are to be strictly preserved by the members of all the temples of the Moorish Science Temple of America, that they will learn to open their meetings and guide them according to the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Every subordinate temple of the Grand Major Temple is to form under the covenant of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and create their own laws and customs as long as they're in accord with the laws of the prophet. It's always an honor to be able to come before our important listening audience to talk to you a little bit about Negro, colored, and black. At this time, I'd like to recite the Moorish American prayer, the source from which we draw our strength. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation by night and by day through his holy prophet, Jew Ali. Amen. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All in my home, I'm gonna let it shine.